Hi 8th graders, this is Mrs. Arietta making your day 6 video for your 10-day packet. Let's read what your requirements are for the day. First up, we have independent reading. Read for 30 minutes and then complete the reading log. Write a 1-paragraph reflection about it. You can write a summary, you can write about the characters, you can write a theme statement and explain it. I know that it also gives you the option of drawing an illustration as well. I've just been giving you writing as the recommendation because that's what the packet says, and I do think it's valuable to practice your writing. The next thing is the climate change picture walk and reflection. So we are going to look at these pictures together, and then we're going to read and annotate source number 1, writing the climate change waves, for information to use in your next writing prompt, which is a narrative writing prompt. And of course, we do need to reflect on the first source as well. So let's start out by looking at these images that the packet gives us when it introduces climate change. So we have a coral reef as the first image. You can see that on the left side, the reef is full of life and the parts are all moving around. That's what a healthy natural coral reef will look like. When coral dies, it turns white. The sun starts to bleach it, it dries up. So the right side in that first image is actually what a dead coral reef looks like. It dries out, it gets white and sun bleached, and just generally it's really sad because the fish can't make that their home. The fish prefer that left side image. The next image we have is actually a forest, 10 years difference, so 2003 to 2013. Now, I'm not sure exactly which forest that this is from, but I happen to know that in the Sierra Nevada mountains, right north of us, there is a pandemic of bark beetles that is actually killing large amounts of trees in our national forests and our national parks. I like to spend my summers in Stanislaus National Forest, and they've been trying really hard to stop the bark beetle because that right side picture is what a lot of California's forests are looking at right now. It's just going to be a lot of brown, a lot of dead trees, and it'll take quite some time for us humans to clear out all those dead trees and make room for new ones, and also stop the bark beetles from continuing their destruction of our forests. The next picture is a coastline. So NASA posted these images to show the effects of humans and how we habitate the planet. And as we do, you just see it slowly chipping away at the green. So the left side is obviously this coast before it became a large bustling city. And then on the right side, it's with humans taking over, an infestation of humans. So I want you to stop, take a moment and think about what changes have occurred and what likely caused each of these changes in these pictures and you have seen of before and afters from climate change. So the next thing we need to do is read the writing prompt. Now, you do not have to write anything for it yet. You don't even have to start an organizer. All we need you to do is think about what you might like to write about. The writing prompt says, a book editor comes to your class and talks about his latest compilation of short stories. All of the stories include information about the climate and climate change. The editor has invited your school to submit several stories for his next compilation. Before you can write your story, you must complete some research about climate change to incorporate into your narrative. Your research has led you to 3 articles and an infographic about the impact of climate change on the Earth. In your story, you will write about an event that occurs due to climate change. The story should be several paragraphs long. When writing your story, find ways to use information and several details about climate change from the sources to improve your story and help you develop the characters, the setting, and the plot. Use details, dialogue, and description where appropriate. So let's break this down. What does this mean to me as your English teacher? Well, I think that the hypothetical that they've introduced means that you can have some creative freedom with this. When it's talking about this book editor and it wants to be part of a compilation, this is not supposed to be some informative essay. It's not supposed to be just the climate has ruined the forest. Oh no, look at the trees. You can have some fun with this. This is meant to be a narrative that happens to be about climate change. When it says several paragraphs long, I want you to keep in mind that when you're using dialogue, every time a new character speaks, you need to start a new paragraph. You cannot have two characters speaking within the same paragraph. So several paragraphs long will vary greatly depending on how much use of dialogue you are including. I would say that for this one, I think that you should focus on page length, not how many paragraphs you're doing, because you might have 20 paragraphs, you might have just 7 or 8. I would say let's try to fill up at least 2, if not the full 3 to 4 pages of narrative writing. I would say no shorter than 2 pages long. When you're writing your story, find ways to use information and several details about climate change. Now, that does not mean that you need to throw a sentence into every paragraph stating the forest had been decaying greatly over the past 10 years due to the bark beetle. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that you can interweave these facts into the story itself. So maybe your story is about a deer trying to feed its young child. Not going to steal from Bambi, I swear. And the mother is hunting around trying to find a patch of green for her child. And the baby asks its mom, "Mom, why can't we eat? Where's all the food?" And the mom says, "The forest didn't used to be like this when I was young. When I was young, it was plentiful. But ever since those beetles showed up, things have been really rough around here." That would be an integration of the facts into your narrative. So you got to think about, as we're reading these sources, ways you can use them to make your story better. How we are going to be grading your essay or your story. So your story will be scored using the following: organization and purpose. How effective was your plot? And did you maintain a logical sequence of events from beginning to end? How well did you establish and develop a setting, narrative, characters, and point of view? How well did you use a variety of transitions? How effective was your opening and closing for your audience and its purpose? So when it says to develop a setting, narrative, characters, and point of view, what it means is that you need to make sure it's very clear where and when your story takes place. When it says narrative, that means that when we get into the organization process, you need to follow plot diagrams so that there is a clear beginning, middle, and end with all of those little pieces in between. Characters. Each character should be distinct in the way that they're presented, the way that they speak. Everyone should be established well and unique from the other characters in the story. Lastly, point of view. If you want to tell your story from a first-person point of view, good. Stick with it the whole time. If you want to tell your story from a third-person point of view, either limited, omniscient, or objective, make sure you stick with that point of view the whole time. Transitions, make sure you're including shortly after and before we could do this, and make sure that we see that there's a logical progression and that each idea is connected. Development and elaboration. How well did you develop your narrative using description, details, and dialogue? How well did you use relevant details or information from the sources in your story? So, can I tell that you included this information about climate change that was put into these sources? Did you use them? Do I see a reference to something within those sources? You don't have to use all the sources, but you need to at least use 1 or 2. And in terms of the description, details, and dialogue, sensory details are going to be really crucial here. Sensory details like what you see, what you hear, what you taste, what you touch, what you smell. All of those things will make your story better. Details, make sure that you are getting specific about those sensory details. And dialogue, we want to see at least one instance of characters speaking to each other. Last thing is conventions. How well did you follow the rules of grammar usage, punctuation, capitalization, and spelling? So even though this story is supposed to be handwritten, you can still type it into a word processor and use spell check to make sure that you're not making any careless errors. So the last step for the day is that you are going to independently read source number 1, Writing the Climate Change Waves, and annotate the source as you go with a highlighter or pen or pencil. Look specifically for facts or examples of climate change that may lead to an intriguing character. Maybe it mentions something about animals and you like the way it describes the animal and you can picture the animal being your main character. Intense or suspenseful plot points. So if there's an article that talks about flooding because of polar ice caps melting, maybe you can use that as your plot point, the flooding happening and hurting our character's home. Or an effective setting that impresses upon the audience a theme of climate change and its negative effects. So maybe you don't set your story in a place where humans are abundant and we don't really see the effect of nature. You choose an effective setting that will give your reader a chance to see all of the things that we are going to read about in the articles about climate change. When you start taking your notes and writing your reflection, you need to write both the fact or example that you found and how you want it to inform your narrative and its elements. So if you saw something that will help make an intriguing character, tell us what the fact was and how it's going to be interwoven into your story. That's all I have for you for today. You only have to do this one reading passage and the reflection. So good luck. Make sure you let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 7. Bye.